All right, here we are, everybody. We are back. The Card Historian. This is episode number 3. We are going to be talking about the 1990s, i.e., the holy grail of card collecting for idiots like me. And of course, Steve is here to tell me why I'm wrong and why I constantly overspend and why card collecting is going to need to become a new hobby to save me from financial peril. Steve, how's it going, pal?
Pretty good. How you doing today?
Good, man. So, today is all about 90s, which is the only era of baseball essentially that I know. Obviously, well, that's a lie. From the mid 80s forward, let's say. But this is definitely my wheelhouse of card collecting. And we talked about in episode 1, this is when the card market was really on fire. Or really kind of got to its peak, I guess. Can you start out by telling us, and me especially, because I really don't know, tell me what junk wax era means. I have that down here in the banner just as the title, because that's what we're kind of talking to it as. You've confirmed that is the correct verbiage. So tell me what exactly that means when we say that.
So basically, baseball's always been popular. Okay, but the card collecting aspect of it was pretty niche at one point. And it was around the mid to late 80s that everybody thought or got the idea that they all thought was exclusive just to them, that they could become, millionaires and retire because of baseball cards. So in response to that and people buying more and more product,
that's
companies like Topps, Donruss, Flair started running the presses, to the point that there's, in some instances, over 1 million of each type of card.
And that's a legit figure, right? Like,
it's probably even higher than that. I haven't really checked because that stuff's always kind of up in the air with people finding more cases of stuff laying around.
Yes.
But yeah, they ran the presses, so to speak, across the board. It kind of started in 1986, but it went unnoticed, and I think even from a modern standpoint, because 86 Topps had black borders. And they look pretty sharp. From a current collection grading standpoint, black borders are just the devil and not good for getting any sort of mint cards. So it kind of saved 1986 from really being full-on junk wax era for that reason. Because even if you bought a brand new sealed box today out of a case, chances are quite a few of them are going to have damage on them just because of that black cardboard stock.
Yeah, and that's just... black is what it is. You have an issue with black in just about anything, really, because it shows every imperfection. So, obviously, we're going to get deeper into it, but I don't mean to get too granular here, but what are we talking about when we say wax? Now, I remember wax packs from, way before I was born, the packs even that had bubble gum in them. Like, what are we talking? Why are they referenced as wax packs?
Literally for that reason. Pretty much, not right from the beginning, but pretty much from the beginning, when, we even say in the 50s, when Topps started producing on a larger scale, sealing packs or cards in literal wax paper was the most efficient and cheapest way to go. Of course, they were doing this because these were toys for kids, really. That's what they were meant for. To people collecting, it means wax stains on the back of the cards, the gum, which, does so much damage just because of the sugar, and it's completely toxic substances they put into the packs. But that was the thing. You got, 15 cards, a piece of gum, and it was 25 cents.
Yeah.
Maybe you got a couple of your favorite players. So for the longest time, they were sealed in wax paper. Then they started to slowly get away to plastic.
So essentially, it's a quality control.
Yeah, like now most packs are some sort of foil because it's the most long-term safe. But yeah, wax it was done for cost reasons and does so much damage to cards.
All right. Well, that is, you learn something new every day. And all my years on this planet, I never knew that was truly the reason. It was just an economic standpoint. They were being cheap to try to maximize profit, it seems like. And, as I've always been complaining, that oversaturated the market and it took a nosedive. But, I think, like we said, if you could afford to get into it, I definitely find it more interesting just because they have cut back. Now, I'm not going to get too far down that road because we're talking about the opposite today. But when we're going back to the 90s or even the 86 when it started, 87, even 88, what were the big, like, what was the turning point where you, because you're a couple years older than me, where you were like, okay, there's a shift in trends here. There's an evolution happening. There's a change happening here.
Hindsight's 2020, so you have to keep in mind the time as well. In the late 80s to early 90s, the internet obviously wasn't what it is today. We relied on trade publications like Beckett and Tough Stuff to get information. And I'm not making any accusations, but it definitely wouldn't have been in their best interest to say, hey, Topps printed 1 million of all 792 cards in 87 Topps.
Yeah.
They do that and they're out of business. So there was a very slow creep to people kind of realizing, like, oh, wait, there's a lot of this stuff out of here. And it has zero value, which really didn't happen until 93, 94, when everything kind of caught up. Topps was a little bit more forthcoming. People did some of the math because boxes were bigger back then. There are 36 packs, 15 cards per pack, versus today where you get 24 and 8. It's a big difference there too.
Yeah.
And people are still finding cases of all these products, and amazingly, they've kind of rebounded and they do fetch a decent price considering. But
I didn't find any cases, but I found some stuff. Anyway, so tell me, I'm sorry I interrupted you there. Tell me, I get that the peak was kind of 93, 94, you're saying. Was there an event that kind of triggered the downfall of the whole thing? Like, was it a new indie card maker trying to come into the game? Was it just nobody was staying in business? Like, what was there something that really caused it, or was it just truly oversaturation?
It was two things. One, mass consciousness of like, wait, everyone at the show has 40 copies of this card. It can't be worth that much. How is it worth that much? The second was the advent of Upper Deck in 1989, because they went from cards being cardboard to high-end, high photography, high value, and high price products that came in foil packs and not wax packs.
Nice.
So them coming out and being fairly transparent on a production level, I mean, still high by today's standards, but in comparison to Topps, Fleer, and Donruss, them coming out and saying, hey, this is what we're going to make, and this is what's going to be released, and they're going to be $2 a pack. Buy them if you want them. If you don't, too bad. We're putting this out there, and we're telling you these are going to retain some degree of value. Of course, that didn't really fully work out, but it kind of shifted public consciousness to, well, if we want to make money doing this, either we have to look way back at stuff from the early 80s, 70s, and before, or ride the wave with these new products that are coming out. And then that kicked off a whole high-end product thing that would take an hour to discuss, but cards started becoming higher, higher value, higher
lower quantity.
Yeah, and just better quality.
Better quality. So I think that's an important first jumping off point. Let me just stop you there. So obviously one of the big takeaways I'm getting just from the first couple minutes here is obviously the quality was nowhere near what it's become. And I'm not even talking about the early years, but well through the mid 90s. I think just by the little bit I've done, it's like I keep saying, night and day when you're collecting then versus now. So, here we are, 89, Upper Deck comes out, and they're, the new game in town as far as quality is concerned. And we were just talking off air. Obviously, your historical knowledge is much better than mine, but the old Griff man, Ken Griffey Jr., 89 Upper Deck rookie. That's, I know, his big one you were telling me. I always remember that because I swear every rookie card he has, he looks like a completely different person to me. I don't know why that is, but so like back then, did you know what brand, I mean, besides, Tops or let's say Upper Deck or whatever, like all those, the offshoot brands, the Leaf, the Zenith, the Prisms, the whatever, Pinnacles. Did you know back then, okay, these are going to be worth something, or no, this is absolute trash? Like before they even started coming out with the stuff they were hiding, let's say.
I think when they got to that point with the higher end stuff, if you will, because it was the 80s into the 90s, a lot of it went on how they looked. Quite honestly, there are some god awful cards, which could be a whole different show, especially from the 90s that came out. That like you just open a pack and you're like, yeah, I don't even want to own any of these, and then have an opposite reaction to something else, and that kind of really holds true to today. There's some horrible Fleer sets from the 90s that, wow, I can't even describe them verbally. I don't have a picture of one on hand because I didn't buy any. I'll have to track one down. But they were so bad, so busy, and so much stuff going on.
And I think, and that's a very good point, because I think that's a part of this hobby that gets lost on people. And in all the conversations you and I have had, which admittedly has just been a handful about the podcast stuff here, but you bring it up every time we talk, and I think it's important. Quality is a big thing. Not so much to somebody like me, who admittedly is more into it from a financial perspective, but if I'm picking up, my Yankee guys, I want the coolest looking card on the block. So obviously, from what you're saying, there's been a conscious effort not only to, limit, oversaturation, but to make the cards look better in principle. And I think that's kind of what bridged us into what would we call the era of cards that we're in right now?
I don't know. Like,
is there a name?
It's just more of I think a modern age. It's a resurgence of folks like ourselves getting back into it, as well as, I mean, I've seen YouTube videos of 12-year-old kids straight up balling at card shows with money. So, it's pretty cool how, like I saw a kid like drop down $12K on a card. Like, that's awesome to me. That kids that young can just roll like that. I wish I had that kind of
me too.
Market, but I think it's more. It's almost like a reset, if you will. I mean, obviously, there's always been cards, and there's probably always going to be in some facet, but it's a new age. I think we kind of went from like the golden age of the 70s, 60s, then to the junk wax, and now it's whole new thing. I'm sure we'll be named after, because eventually everything good comes to some sort of end.
Sure.
Or transition even on the card front.
Gotcha. And that's all good stuff, and that's a perfect segue into the next part. That's about as recent as I want to get. We're going to go back and try to keep this 90s focused. So I know you have some pictures of us, pictures for us of some cards and such from the 90s, some popular, very popular guys, very popular cards. We're going to be talking about that. But before we do, one thing that struck me, and I've just figured this out over the last couple of weeks, I had just assumed that 95% of the cards in this era are worthless. And I don't know how far I'm off or not, but I was looking at some, and the value has plummeted from the 90s, but has since really gotten back up there. McGuire's USA rookie is the one that I think of off the top of my head. Bonds, is it 86 or 87? I don't know which the popular one is, but I saw one of his higher graded amounts of these, but they're going for a premium. Any particular reason for the resurgence of these guys? I mean, these obviously were the steroid era players mostly. So
I think it's twofold. One's nostalgia. Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. The second is grading. To get these older cards and get them to grade well are two very different things. Yeah, we're talking stuff from 87, for example, how long ago that was. Even with the best of storage, the slightest ding on a corner or, miss something just on the card itself, even within the printing of the card itself, could prevent it from getting a high grade. Not to mention centering and all the other fun stuff, the focus of the picture. which really drives up the value because despite the millions of cards made, the numbers that are going to actually get high grades are very minimal.
Yeah, and that is a very, very good point. One that I'm finding is a very expensive point if you're not familiar with it. And so, if you could, Steve, I know you have some cards at the ready. Why don't you pull those up for us, and we'll go through that. We'll talk about those a little bit. And I'm sure anybody who's listening, if you're a '90s kid like me, or you were in the hobby like you were, we're going to remember most of these guys here. So take us through who we're looking at here. Donnie Baseball, I see.
Yeah, we're going to start with 87 Tops. A lot of people that were in the hobby at any point in time remembers this wood grain border.
Yes, sir.
This also was kind of the beginning of the end. But again, we didn't know it back then. Right. But there's some really key things in this set. One, really design-wise, very plain. I should say plain, very clean design to it. You have the wood grain border, the name at the bottom, nice full pictures of the players, which is, I think, why it's still kind of desirable when well graded. But yeah, tons of Hall of Famers and stars. Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire. It's like one of those sets that anyone that collected has seen, knows about, and probably would still buy to this day.
Gotcha. I'm sorry, I keep switching the layouts to try to make this work, and it's not working. So those of you listening, pardon me, technical difficulties. Hang on, buddy. I'm going to remove and have you restream it here 1 second.
Okay.
We're learning as we go, folks. So if you want to yell, email me. That's fine. All right. So I think, is this the one we were using? Let's see here. This one, I believe, right? No. Try to share now, Steve, please.
Oh, okay.
All right. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Hopefully they won't see this because I'll figure out how to have edited it out by then. But if not, everybody can blame me. So anyway, before I threw us all off track yet again, Donnie Baseball, one of my all-time favorite guys. I mean, we could do an episode just talking about how awesome that mustache is, but let me start off by saying the 87 Tops specifically is one of my absolute favorite years from that era for a couple of reasons. The bad wood paneling background, which is just endearing to me and I love it, and a set that I loved that you of course made me aware that of course they don't make it anymore, Topps Tiffany, was big in this year specifically. Tell us a little bit as we're going to the next card here about this 87 set, the wood paneling. Then tell us a little bit about the Tiffany. And, it seems like that was a really pivotal year for card design to really really take a left a little bit, which is cool.
Yeah, and it gets, as we'll see, progressively different more and more as each year goes by. But with this set alone, that's the paneling I had in my bedroom. Definitely. So to really get that nostalgia feel about it, I don't know, it was one of the first sets even myself that I fully collected on my own.
Yeah.
So I mean, a huge at 792 cards, but like I said, the number of Hall of Famers and big names in here, because at this point Topps didn't do anything to signify rookie cards really. Which again could be its whole own other topic. Nowadays you have the rookie logo, the RC logo on the card on the front, but
that's all I know.
Wire, Bonds, etc. don't have the rookie designation because Topps also did traded sets at the end of the year. So just technically Barry Bonds was in the 86 Topps traded. McGwire has the Olympic card in 85. So I guess just because it wasn't a thing, people were just wanted to see their favorite players.
Yeah.
But to fill out 792 cards, you had to fit some young guys in there too. So they this is kind of where the rookie cards started to actually really appear.
Yeah, and I mean,
your designation to it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're looking at it even now, 30 years later. If you get that card in a nice grade, I mean, that's a nice mantelpiece. That's a nice conversation piece. you know.
And then you get to like the Tiffany sets they would put out each year, which same exact picture and card, except they had a super glossy front, and the back was, instead of being like the grayish cardboard, was a nice dark white with the regular back text and stat lines on the back of the card. You know, they're very noticeable, but they look really sharp, and definitely command a huge premium even today.
Nice. That is awesome. Donnie Baseball. Love him. He's with old Toronto north of the border these days, which is weird, but at least he got out of Miami. So who do we got next here?
Next up, go to 88.
Oh, Cal. There he is.
Again, kind of, you can see, you know, very clean design. A little bit, you know, kind of a 90s feel to it. One of the things they did in this year that really wasn't done prior, and the reason why I picked this card, aside from being Cal Ripken, is you see the bat obscures the R.
Yes.
Before, it was, the team name was always prevalent out in front. This is when they kind of started taking some risks, if you will, with the design. Massively overproduced set. A couple of neat cards in here. Two in particular, I only got a picture of the one, which is Mark McGuire, the record breaker card. It's a little tough to see, but down in the corner here, the error card has a little white triangle.
You pointed that out to me, and I said I would have never known that had you not mentioned it.
And this went unnoticed like forever until it started showing up in price guides.
I could see why.
Yeah, and they were from, obviously, early runs had the errors. The boxes and that were put out after were corrected without it, which gives it a little bit of a premium to it. You know, a PSA 10 like this is probably about maybe $150 of the error versus like $70 for the corrected version.
I got you. And so that brings me into a whole nother thing. And you know, you could take me off this topic if I'm getting too long-winded here, but because we might have to do a whole nother episode about this. But I feel like errors like this, printing errors, and I know you have a couple other cards coming up with errors that we're going to talk about, but to me it seems like these cards are being made popular and being overinflated because the quality control was lacking. And I think that's a dumb reason to value a card higher. I mean, I get it. The Frank Thomas one that everybody knows about without the name on it, that's a glaring error. A little mark on a guy's foot. I mean, I think we're grasping at straws a little bit here. I mean, am I wrong thinking this way? Or?
Not at all. I mean, really, this first card on top here with the white triangle really doesn't look wrong. It looks like the side, the back of his heel. No one would have noticed. The reason why Topps changed it, who knows? But because they did, it gives it part of its own value.
It's uniqueness.
Gotcha. And errors were a huge thing. People chased them in the 90s, which is why I chose a couple pictures with them, because they define the late 80s and early 90s, I think even more than the card sets themselves.
I agree there. All right, what's next? Oh, there he is. The other Ripken.
Yeah.
One that I wish wasn't on TV yet is. All right. So he did play for about 8 minutes. Yep. And this is the only card he's ever had made of him. That's not true, but that's all. This is the only one everyone knows. Tell us why everyone knows this card.
So, for censoring reasons, I went with the one of the corrected copies. But on the handle of the bat, one of his team players who thought so highly of him put words on there with the initials FF.
Oh.
And it made it past quality control because honestly, and I have this card in the actual error form.
Folks, this is a quick Google search. We're not going to show it here. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Just put Billy Ripken error. It's all going to come up for the guy. But it wasn't easy to notice. Like I could see this getting by quality control because on the barrel of the bat, no one's looking there.
I think somebody should have been that day.
Right. And there was huge outcry about it. So there's quite a few actual corrected versions, some that are worth more even than the original, let's say, FF version. There's the black box that we have here. There's a scribble and whiteout. I think those are the only 3 variations of the correction. If I'm wrong, I apologize.
Whiteout? Really?
And
I did
believe
not know this.
that might be the most valuable of the four of them.
Wow.
But if I was going to get a graded copy, I'd want the original one that came out, just because I don't know, I find it hilarious.
I mean, I don't want to get us too far off topic here, but I think you'll know what I'm talking about. Like, if we're playing Punch Out, I'm showing my age here. Which Punch Out are we playing? We're not playing Mr. Dream. We're playing Mike Tyson's Punch Out. So right. I get it. We want the original, but and I mean that's a glaring example. Everybody knows, the Billy Ripken, and we're going to get into some other ones here. I'm going to take a little side trip here about Billy Ripken because he's always been an interesting cat to me. Again, just being a fair weather. Diehard Yankee fan, but fair weather baseball fan when I was growing up. I had no idea who Billy Ripken was. He wasn't mentioned on TV. He was referred to as Cal's brother instead of Billy. Was he any good? Why did he not last? Was he as good and got hurt? Tell us a little bit about good old Uncle Bill here.
He's basically below the Mendoza line. I think he has like a lifetime 202 average or something crazy like that. It wasn't very good at all. He did get his moment in the sun. I mean, this was national news when this came out. It was
national news.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because there was, like I said, an uproar in what's considered a kid's product. There's some speculation that he did it himself.
I was going to say it's hard not to notice that knob or head or whatever of your own bat. I mean,
yeah,
But
see, at the time too, when they did pictures, it's not like how it is today, where there's photographers at every game and they like to get action shots. They pose for these pictures, and a lot of times they would just grab a bat off the rack, and not look at it. So no one can say for sure except for Bill, and I don't think he's going to say.
I was going to say I don't recall that ever coming out that I remember.
Pure speculation.
So let me just I'll finish with Billy Ripken because we've already given him too much attention. How was he defensively? I mean, obviously he was nowhere near Cal, but I mean, was he an adequate? Was he even a 4A defender? Can we call him that?
I would say that. Yeah, I wouldn't call him a plus defender at all.
Okay.
Capable, but he had nothing with the bat.
And so he just washed out because he couldn't hit.
Especially in that era. Like, you had a hitter and go home.
Yeah. So. And it's probably got to be weird, like, when your brother is like a god and for like legit reasons and you're not even close and you're on the same team.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for that short period of time. I think him and Ozzie Canseco still send each other Christmas cards, but I don't know that for sure.
Ozzie Canseco, who started as a pitcher, by the way.
I did not know this.
Yeah.
I did not know this. I could tell you he still goes around to Jose Canseco appearances, trying to be Jose Canseco. I heard about one of those recently. That's a whole nother episode. I love Jose Canseco, but he is his own worst enemy, that guy.
Yeah.
He could have been, and I might be overreaching here, but he could have been on the level, and I'm not player-wise, not physical capability-wise, but popularity-wise, I think he could have gotten up there as a broadcaster, especially with the Spanish guys, of like an A-Rod.
Yeah.
He just torpedoed his own career because he thought, and this is all speculation on my part, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he thought, of course I'm doing roids. I'm going to come out and say I'm doing roids, and everybody's going to accept me. And then the opposite happened. And then when they caught everybody, and he's like, yeah, I told you. They're like, yeah, so we were right for hating you, and we still hate you. And so he kind of got burned twice. And am I wrong about that?
Oh, yeah. And then the third time when he outed everybody in his book. So, whoever the guy's agent is really did not direct him that well as far as his career path.
No. All right. What do we got next here? Oh, Greg Jeffries.
89 Topps. Yeah, this was the card when this set first came out. And as a Mets fan, I was hoping he was going to be the answer, which didn't really happen. But he had a good career.
Don't hate on me. Yeah. So I don't know this guy from Adam. Was he like, other than you being a diehard Met fan, was he going to be the next big thing? Like, was that what was going to happen?
This is kind of really why I put this card in here, aside from being a Mets fan. This is like one of the cards, along with a few others, that kind of started tanking the hobby, because it showed how volatile it is as a hobby, let alone how they have to perform.
Yeah.
Just because he was a huge, prospect and was going to do all this, and actually came up and had a great first half a season. People were buying them, like, I'm not even joking, by the hundreds, thinking, I'll be rich and I can retire off this in 30 years. Yeah, that didn't happen because he kind of fizzled out.
Yeah.
He bounced around. I mean, he had a long career, don't get me wrong. He wasn't a poor player. Probably a positive WAR, I would imagine, over his career.
How long was he in the show? I should have Baseball Reference up, but I don't. Roughly.
I'd say at least a decade.
Okay.
Or close to it.
Which is, I mean, you're basically, by today's standards, that's border. If you make it 10 years, you're basically considered borderline Hall of Fame. Just for being there that long. So I know the name. So he must have been fairly popular for a little bit of time there in the mid-90s, because the name immediately sounded familiar, but I don't remember ever seeing this card before. What is something like this going for?
Nothing.
And what was it going, or what was it expect? Did it get to a peak, or did he fizzle out before that could even happen?
No, it really did, especially when the set first launched. I mean, these were sometimes in the $3 to $5 range at one point, which at that time was huge.
Sure.
The card to be $1, it was like, wow. So some of these rookies, and this is where kind of like the prospecting, I'm going to be rich off this in the future thing started happening, and people were buying them at $3 a piece. And you could probably find 10 of them for $3 on eBay right now. But it just shows that it is still, even today, it's dependent upon the player and what they do their whole career, not just when they start out.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm learning it more and more even now, and it's one of the major reasons I wanted to do a podcast like this is, I mean, you could overspend really, really easily, becoming nostalgic, becoming whatever, and I'm guilty of that. I own 20 more cards today than I did 2 weeks ago. And that is not a good habit to get into, which is, again, another reason for this. But there really is no, speaking to your volatility, there really is no way to, I guess, capitalize on the market of a player, is there? I mean, unless you had Judge's rookie card last year when he did what he did and you unloaded them all, I mean, unless you happen to land right on it, there's no guesswork involved, is there? That's how volatile the market was.
It really is selling fast.
Back then, anyway.
Right, yeah, back then, because it took forever, because we also gave players a lot more rope back then. Like, oh, he had a bad second year, he'll be good next year, don't worry about it. And then that wouldn't happen, and then it wouldn't happen again, and they just spiral right down any sort of collectability level.
Right.
But as far as today, the best way to do that, especially with rookies, unless it's someone that you really do think personally is going to be a long-term investment, if some random dude gets super hot, like Mike Yastrzemski a few years ago,
yes,
sell immediately. Other people buy them.
Greg Berg. Sorry.
Yeah.
Caught
Perfect example.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure at one point his rookies are going for more than Aaron Judge's. So, you got to kind of...
That scares me. Oh, my God. I didn't even know that.
It's $3, like nothing crazy, but, it shows you how crazy the hobby could be. I mean, Judge at this point is pretty much, outside of a massive scandal, has cemented himself as a Yankee, as one of the greatest players. So his cards are safe.
He's Jeet Jr. unless he does it to himself. That's
right.
how I look at it.
I don't see it. The guy's too down to earth and cool.
I think so, and he knows what he has. He knows what he has. I mean, don't think for a second, and I know I'm going off on another tangent. There might be shorts coming out on the channel for all the tangents I go on, everybody. So look for the shorts section. There might be stuff there. But speaking of Aaron Judge really quickly, so he especially, you just said, he's a cool guy. I love him. I'm 37 years old. I love the guy. I love the guy. And to hook somebody like me that has been out of baseball other than being a fair weather fan for 20 years, that's something. That's a whole different kind of player. But don't, and this is what I want to bring up, because I think a lot of people skirt past this issue because he signed the big contract. Everybody knows, for those that don't know, he signed the $40 million a year, 9 years, straight deal. From what I understand, no incentives or anything. So he's getting paid whether he performs or not. He knows it. They know it. Michael K knows it because he says it every other day. So when we get 3, 4, 5 more good years out of Judge and then he tanks, are we going to be able to have these same conversations about his rookie cards are still holding value?
I think so, and I'll tell you why. And he's an exception to this, and what I think would happen, at least I hope would, because I do think highly of him. I think, say 5 years from now, if he started to sharply decline, you're going to lose a little bit as you get older. But if he has a real sharp drop off, I could see him doing the classy thing and opting out. It's basically letting 4 years go.
I don't even know if he has an opt out built in, does he?
Well, not necessarily, but if him and the Yankees got together after in year 6 and said, "Look,
renegotiate or something.
I can't do this anymore. Can I come back for 1 year to retire? I'll take, maybe not league minimum. He's still going to put fans in the seat. But I think he has that level of class that he wouldn't write out 4 years of hitting 220. I just don't think he would do that. I think he respects the game too much, and the history of the game. I hope so. I hope I'm right. Because
I hope you're right too, because there are people that are the exact antithesis of that example, Alex Rodriguez being one of them. He got that second contract, which even at the time I thought was a mistake. And they end up, if I'm not mistaken, they ended up letting him go. They released him. They basically said, here's the bench, you're riding the pine, pal. And either you say you're going to retire and we'll let you play a game or two, or you're just going to sit here. And if I recall, that's kind of the way it happened.
Yep.
So that's a shame. But, you're right, though. You're making a lot of great points here. Back in the 90s, everything was at abundance as far as quality control obviously was not there. But at the same token, that makes it cool, I think. Yeah. That's one of the things that does make it cool. So let's transition. I think you got a couple more pictures to show us, right?
I do. And one of the reasons why Greg Jeffries fell off the radar really fast is because of this guy.
There he is. He's not senior.
89.
Upper Deck.
Sorry. Yep. 89 Upper Deck came out and changed the hobby. Really rippled through till today.
Pardon me. So let's just focus on that. Tell me why that is the case with Upper Deck in 89.
So they come out as a new company, decide they're going to make cards, and they get exclusivity rights to Ken Griffey Jr. So they gambled on this kid being the kid. They didn't go after Greg Jeffries. They didn't go after anybody else in that rookie class. They focused in on Ken Griffey Jr. And it made their name. He's card number 1 in the set. They promoted him. Only 89 set in 89 was the Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck rookie. It was a huge game changer. I remember pulling one out of a pack and just like being ecstatic outside of a card show, opening up a pack of Upper Deck because they were so expensive at the for that time. Like $2 a pack. That was crazy.
Sure.
And this was a big turning point for the hobby, and
so
it's still released today.
And so let me just get a little clarification here. So this one, for as far as Griffey, this is his big one specifically because of the exclusivity.
Yes.
The deal that he signed, because there are, as we all know, there are other Griffey rookie cards. Nobody talks about them, but they're there. Any particular reason other than the exclusivity why this is heads and tails valued so much higher than the rest? Or is it just strictly that quality?
really think it's that and quality are the main thing. They're only able to do it for the 1 year, so they got him in the set immediately. Made him number one. Started the rookie subset that led off almost all upper deck sets for a good decade. There's a lot in this one card that has affected the hobby for real. Eventually led to the rookie symbol from Topps, which now is just iconic.
And I'm sure we'll do one-off episodes about all this stuff because it's all these weird things that make this so interesting to me. But this one in particular, I think I was telling you before we started recording, his other rookie cards, not only are they essentially worthless, he looks different. He looks like a different guy. Like they were obviously taken in different years. He was in probably AA or AAA. I know he wasn't a minor league guy that long, but I mean, he looks one of the few that I'm like, I have to take a second look at some of his rookie cards and go, is that him? You know, because he has a unique look to him. And when you remember him in the 90s, you remember the backwards hat and, you know, that swing. The rookie card, Ken Griffey Jr., doesn't look like that guy. No, I mean, this one does, not the other ones. So that's just a side note about Griffey there. But that is that's the kid right there, man. He's the one guy in the 90s that I think pretty much all of us can say really never, like, he didn't do anything to disappoint us as fans. I mean,
not at all.
Maybe falling asleep at the end of his career. But
going to the Reds will do that to anybody.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And, you know, even though Ken Griffey Jr. hates the Yankees with the heat of 1,000 suns, I'm still a fan. Apparently, I was watching an interview with him, and he refused to ever be traded to the Yankees. Apparently, it was a known secret because of how they treated his father. And I had heard that he was in the dugout, and I want to say it was maybe Greg Nettle's son. I could be wrong. They were playing catch, and it became a race issue, and they basically told Junior, you know, your senior to, you know, keep the kid in the locker room or some nonsensical crap like that. And I'd imagine that's true because he's still telling that story 30 years later. But I mean, I can't imagine Ken Griffey Jr., even as a kid, never struck me as a confrontational character. So that just speaks to the weirdness of the world at that time, I think. For a guy like that to tell that story and yet be essentially one of, I guess you want to say, on the Mount Rushmore of 90s baseball players.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And yeah, he was notoriously known for being at games with his dad. The fact they got to play together, I thought was awesome for them to make that happen for them.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I mean, I know that as a fan, and I know he's probably the only one I could cite, father and son. I remember they hit a homer in the same game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So what did make that happen back then?
I think it was a little bit of just respect for what he had given to the game up to that point. Kind of rejuvenate it. People wanted to see this young kid play, so you know, people watching games went up. People went to Mariners games, you know, which that alone is a huge accomplishment. I think it was just more so of, honestly, a thank you. It definitely wasn't from a playing perspective or stat perspective. You know, Griffey Sr. was at the end of his career. He was not, you know, it was more of honestly, like a thank you. I think both of them.
But I guess what I'm getting at, and this is the part of the story I'm unfamiliar with, was it what part of it, or was it both parts that was the favor? Like, was it bringing him up that was the favor, or was it keeping Senior around an extra year, or both?
Keeping Senior around, yeah, because Griffey punched his own ticket. Griffey Jr.
I was going to say, okay, yeah,
amazing skill, one of the most iconic swings in baseball of all time. Mm-hmm. It was just letting his dad come back that one more year, when honestly he was done. You know, and to actually. And
was he expected to have retired, or did he come back? Like, how did that all go down? I honestly don't know.
He was basically on his way out. He was going to retire, and I'm assuming Griffey Jr. may have brought it up. You know, like, hey, can my dad play? I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but that's pretty much kind of how it worked out. And they got to experience something that I think there's only been two other. I'd be hard pressed to name them. Father, son. On the same team at the same time.
Yeah, geez. Off the top of my head, I mean, I don't know if you have the examples in mind. I couldn't even think of them. Because I'm thinking of like guys I know, Aaron Boone and Bob Boone, but they were different like the same generation thing. That's so tough, man, because you only got like a 2 or 3 year window there where you could really cross over. But that is very, very interesting. So, any more left, or do we have? Is that the last one? I don't
I'm
remember.
trying to think. I think Bonds might have played with his dad. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah. I don't know about that one either, but you might be right. You
I
might
know
be
their
right about
careers overlapped,
that.
but
And it's they're not father and son, but the brothers, the knuckleballers from the 70s and 80s, Phil Necro, Joe Necro, they were brothers, right? I believe.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool, man. Cool. Well, I definitely I do not own anymore that Griffey rookie card, but I'm glad to see some cards are still holding their value. I think because we're at about 45 minutes, so I want to get to maybe one more topic, and as usual, we're just kind of free flowing here. Good, we do have more. So this guy in particular, Juan Gonzalez. This guy I was saying to you off air as a kid. I was a huge fan of because every time you saw him, he hit bombs. But he wasn't a talker. I mean, he spoke English, but he wasn't one for interviews. He wasn't anything to speak about defensively. And he was, in my opinion, never the size of a roided guy, but it's kind of just always assumed that he's been just because of the amount of home runs that he had. So before you tell us about this Juan Gonzalez card we're looking at here, give me your thoughts on Juan Gonzalez, the player.
I do think he bulked up kind of quickly over a 3-year span.
Okay.
But boy, did I love watching him for the same reason. Like, he just murdered the baseball. Had that kind of killer attitude at the plate, even on the field as well. Loved watching him play. I kind of wish he maybe had a longer, more productive career than he did.
He fell off a cliff at the end.
Yeah, I think he ended up with the Indians at the end, and that just never works well for anyone.
In the 90s, it did for a couple years.
That's true.
Yeah. But you're right. But man, I miss him. And he's another one. He's one of those weird ones, like Rafael Palmeiro, I feel like, that is adamant that they're like, they've never touched the stuff. And the court of public opinion is like, BS. We don't believe you. And that obviously, from a collector's perspective, is going to hurt his collectability. Or am I wrong about that?
Oh, definitely. Juan Gonzalez is almost a forgotten about player to some degree, as far as the hobby goes.
Sure.
Monetary end of it anyway. But still has his fans, don't get me wrong, especially from our era that got to see him play.
And is this his big one, card-wise? Rookie?
But technically, I mean, it is, because this one actually is an error. It's a reverse image.
Oh, okay.
The only way you can really tell is by his uniform number.
Yes.
It should be number 19 instead of its backwards 901. But it's not even of crazy value because, and the reason why I threw this Donruss card in here is when you compare that to Topps.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
it's not even close.
Good. And then you end up here. These cards are so thin.
Yeah.
Like, I can't. My hatred for these cards are so high. I really couldn't even spend the time talking about it. They're just poorly made. Cash in, buy Donruss to just keep going. And they made it a few more years, obviously, and they kind of faded away for a bit.
And it looks like somebody spilled leftover house paint.
Yep.
The cheapest kind they could find on the background of that card, which is just depressing. I never was a fan of them. They're very aesthetically unpleasing. I agree with you. Yeah. And it's a shame that good old Juan Gon does not get the credit he deserves. One of these days, we'll do an episode about roids. My stance has softened somewhat over the years because I've kind of gotten to the point where it's like, if everybody was doing it, kind of thing.
That's how I looked at it from the beginning. You have to rate them. I mean, You have the dead ball era,
Mm-hmm.
live ball era, right era.
Yeah.
Again, we juiced the ball again era. Like
I was going to say the new juiced era. Yeah.
they all were, not all, I shouldn't say that, but the competitive level was enhanced,
Yeah.
and it was able to be done across the board. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So the guys that opted to do it, yeah, they were stroking 40, 50 home runs. I don't think that, because Major League Baseball basically allowed it to happen because it was good for the game, should punish them after the fact. I just, like I said, we do a whole episode on that. I agree with you. I just think, I was kind of like, yeah, heck with those guys. They don't deserve it when it first happened. And now I'm like, you know what, though? How could you say that a guy like Bonds shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame?
I'm with you. And I'm a guy, like, I cannot stand the Barry Bonds for a lot of reasons, mostly his arrogance. But I can't take away the type of player he was. And that's absent of the roids. In my opinion, the guy's first half of his career, had he stayed on that trajectory for 3 or 4 more years at that level, would have still been Hall of Fame caliber, in my opinion. Easy. And, when he was hitting 70 home runs and it looked like he was standing up and sitting down at the same time because he was so huge, like, it wasn't that fun to me. Like, even a couple years earlier, McGuire and Sosa, I knew they were juiced up too, but it was better. Am I sharing a popular opinion with you, or no?
Yeah, definitely. I don't get the.
I guess my point is, whatever you do later in life is really going to dictate your value and how you act as a person well after your playing years is really something a lot of these guys from the 90s, I'm coming to realize, really torpedoed their own market value because of their asinine behavior.
I think a big part of it, and I couldn't think of the exact word.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what happened is it's the unwritten rules of baseball that are slowly going away. Finally, you kind of weren't allowed to have fun. Like Fair. You couldn't celebrate. You couldn't point at the pitcher and laugh at him, or point at the batter and laugh at him when he struck out. Yeah. That's changing slowly, and I think for the better. It's making for a more exciting, compelling game. But back then, you couldn't do those things. So I think a lot of these guys overreacted outside the game.
Yeah, I agree.
Where maybe if they could have let it out a little bit, it would have been okay. I don't know. I'm just saying, I just think there were some of those things that they couldn't do when they wanted to, led to bad decisions.
Yeah, I agree too. I agree with you there 100%. And I think for guys like me, and I guess, you too, because we both watched it. There's players I like. There's players I've forgiven. There's players I've changed my stance on, and there's players that I'm digging my heels in, like Barry Bonds. And is that a fairly common assumption amongst fans of our age range? We're over it, but we still have our picadillos.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. I really think that it still holds up.
Gotcha. So let's move here on to the next one I see here, the Big Hurt. This is probably, if you know anything about baseball cards, error cards in particular, i.e. me, who knows nothing, you know this one. You don't own this one, meaning whoever's hearing this probably, but it's out there. So tell us what we're looking at here.
So this is the 90 Topps no name Frank Thomas card. Mm-hmm. So you see the big blue box there at the bottom doesn't have his name in it. There's some slight variations where you can see a little bit of it. It was just a printing error. The entire sheet was pretty much screwed, but it's Frank Thomas. And I thought he'd be a good person or a good player to leave off on from this era. Because talking about a big dude.
Oh, yeah.
And Frank Thomas was all natural. That guy.
Really?
That's at Auburn. He's in college there, and he's already pretty built.
Oh, yeah.
To have the career that he did and do what he did was amazing. And to do it assumably cleanly.
Yeah.
But this card here in particular, this is a beat up copy. I had to find a copy real quick just for the podcast because I don't know this card. But because it is Frank Thomas and it is extremely limited, raw card, you could probably get $2,000 to $3,000 for. Highly graded PSA, 9 or 10, probably hit 10,000 on a good day. The thing that gets me with this and why I wanted to include it is because it's from the junk wax era, which is the whole point of this actual episode. We don't have production numbers. Topps doesn't know how many sheets they messed up.
That was my next question, actually.
Was it 1,000 sheets? Because 1,000 sheets out of 1,000,000 cards, that's rare. Are there cases sitting somewhere in some distributor's warehouse that has one in every box? Like, we don't know, but it has garnered so much popularity. And as far as errors go, like, this error didn't exist in 1990. No one knew about this error.
Wow.
And believe me, I had a lot of 90 Topps cards. Never saw this one.
You were not one of the lucky few, eh?
Nope. And to have never seen this, never known about it, and then all of a sudden, a few years ago, it started popping up online. Kind of at first, and I was part of this, like, well, maybe they were rubbing it off with, like, some sort of low-level, not turpentine, but some sort of ink remover, trying to make something unique. But then it did come out that it was the sheets they were on, because people actually had uncut sheets.
Wow.
That had, where you could kind of see it was like a
misalignment
across the page where all the black ink was missing. So it just happened to be where Frank Thomas was, the whole name was caught in that printing defect. But as far as errors go, I wouldn't mind selling one right now, but there's still no definitive numbers on how many of these actually exist.
That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. And I mean, and I love that you saved this one for last, because I agree with you. It's a very logical closure point. We may come back and do a part 2 about this, or a part 32 for all I know, because there's a lot we can talk about when it comes to this era of cards. But let me just stay on the big hurt here for a minute while we wrap this up. Obviously, for the reasons you just said, this is his most known rookie because of the error, but this is not something a fair weather fan or even a fan with some coin can really get. Like, you have to luck into finding this and getting it for a price that you could stomach. So Frank Thomas, like you said, I mean, it's kind of a lucky break that it happened to that guy. Was there anybody else in that set that didn't have names, or just him?
None that I'm aware of. There were printing defects for a long time, even after this, within baseball card products in general, but none to a player of this magnitude. This was the card when the set came out. It's still the card all these years later in that set. But you will see, like, massive, different backs, wrong back cards, and there's a niche audience for them, and people that do like collecting them. Blank back cards, blank front cards. So there was a lot of printing problems that occurred in this era. This happened to be one where the rest of the card is perfect.
It's fine. Yeah.
Not this copy. This copy's beat the heck. But for just the name to have been affected, like, you can see there's, even within the shoes and the shadow along the bottom, it wasn't all the black ink. It was literally just right there.
Wow.
That took the name out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
kind of a very weird serendipitous way for it to happen, and to happen to the one guy.
Yeah. Now, for those of us out there that, don't have the kind of coin we're talking about for this, is there a Frank Thomas rookie out there that has retained some sort of value? Because, like you said, he's a clean Hall of Famer, one of the few from that era. So.
Oh, yeah. Really? And this is kind of was the year that card started to change. I'm going to just borrow an image here quickly.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in 1990, the Donruss was part of Donruss. The Leaf Company came out with high-end cards, kind of to rival Upper Deck.
Okay.
If I was going to go after a PSA 10 of Frank Thomas rookie, this is the one I would go after as opposed to the Topps one. And I will show you why here in just a second, because I do think if you compare the two, I think it's the better looking card. Again, personal preference.
Sure.
Just bring it up here and you can be the judge.
And while we're waiting for that, let me just tell anybody that as we're now recording episode 3. I'm hopeful that I'm going to have episode 1 out sometime, probably the beginning of this week. But we're going to probably you and I have talked offline about, just the various weird things we love about this era. So I'm sure we'll be coming back to this ad nauseum, throughout various things. But I was happy to get this one episode strictly out of the way to kind of explain a little bit more about this era. And I'm happy that, we're ending on Frank Thomas because he's just awesome. So tell me this other card that I'm going to like better. Well, I will be the judge, hopefully. Oh, okay. Now, remind, I say everybody, but really me, Leaf is a Canadian company. Is that right?
Yes, they were part of Donruss. And was the Canadian equivalent. And throughout the 80s, there was always also Donruss Leaf. Well, when Upper Deck came out, Donruss is like, you saw that red paint splattered mess.
Yep.
They weren't capable of doing it on their own. So they're like, how do we launch something new? Because we can't rebound from this crap. Let's a high value product. Nice. And they came out with Leaf.
Nice.
And this is the card in the set. Really,
what is this one going for Frank?
Yeah, I haven't checked in a while.
But this is the one to get for him, because the blank one is not a possibility for normal folks.
Right. And even this one at a PSA 10 is probably over $1,000.
Cool.
Because Leaf actually was, for the time, limited. It wasn't massively produced. It pushed the ball a little bit on pack price. They were in the $3 to $5 range now and then.
Nice.
And again, at that time, it was crazy. But this, as opposed to the Topps card, I think it's just a nice, clean-looking card.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
In White Sox uniform instead of Auburn.
Auburn, yeah.
Because really, aside from the no name, that card itself, even if you see it in person, most copies are a little blurry.
Oh, yeah?
These were like photo images, just like Upper Deck was. The production value, the pictures were much higher. And I just think long-term value, even though Leaf isn't what it used to be now, that this would be the more long-term collectible one, and probably toughest to get in a good grade because they were notoriously miscut.
The good old centering. What keeps us from a 10 most of the time.
Well, you see this one here is like perfect.
I was going to say, yeah. Wow. Very cool. Well, I agree with you. That is a logical closure point because, Frank Thomas is the man. So we're going to end it right there. And we will be back next week with episode 4, another podcast about card collecting or some variety thereof. So until next week, I am Ray. That is Steve. We will see you next time.